Hello everyone, welcome to our lecture video on IT Professional Elective 1, which is the Virtual Systems and Services. So for this video lecture, we will discuss about virtualization. Okay? Virtualization is very common in big industries in performing heavy transactions like, for example, the e-commerce and online marketing. Okay? So you know that in the early years of computing, um, users, okay, usually utilize a uh, a hardware, okay, or this physical component in doing or performing computation. And these computers has, of course, resources like memory, CPU, monitor, keyboard, and so on and so forth. But inevitably, uh, there are now many and hundreds or thousands of transactions eventually, and companies really want high performing computations, and they invented a so-called virtual machines or virtualization to perform or to do the job. Okay, so now, so let us now begin the definition of virtualization. So what is virtualization? So actually, virtualization is the creation of okay, a virtual environment. So when we say virtual environment, it creates an abstract layer of a computing capability, uh, abstract layer of a computer. Okay, so this virtual environment has operating system. Okay, it has a server and has also storage media and other networking resources. You imagine that a virtual environment is the same as a physical environment. So you imagine a laptop computer, and that is a hardware itself having many resources, hardware resources, and that has own operating system. So a virtual environment is just like uh, a physical component, though, but it is actually a software, okay, that is at the top of a hardware. Okay, so virtualization uses software that simulates hardware functionality in order to create virtual system. Okay, so this practice allows IT organization to operate multiple operating systems. Okay, so in the virtual environment, actually, user can simulate or can create different types of operating system to be executed. And of course, there are many benefits of virtualization, which include greater efficiency and economies of scale. Okay, so now how virtualization works. So one is virtualization describes a technology in which an application. Okay, actually, virtualization is actually a software, an application that allows you to create a guest operating system. So a virtual hardware or a virtual computer that has a guest operating system, or data storage that is abstracted away from true underlying hardware or software. Okay. So another is a key use of virtualization technology is server virtualization. Okay. So it is a software that is installed in the operating system over a physical hardware, which actually is server virtualization, and that is sometimes called hypervisor. Okay, so to speak, hypervisor is a software to emulate the underlying hardware. Okay, so hypervisors take the physical resources, okay, and separate them so they can be utilized by the virtual environment. They are able to sit on top of an OS, or they can be directly installed on the hardware. So actually, a hypervisor is an application or program which actually separate from a physical hardware, and this uh, hypervisor emulates virtual environment, right? And that is installed at the top of operating system, and other is could be installed directly on the hardware. Okay. So as you can see on the slide, in the early years of computing with its traditional architecture, we have here the devices or the resources, okay, the traditional architecture, and this actually the hardware itself or tangible component itself, and this computer in the traditional computing, it must have an operating system in order to do computing. Right, so at the top of operating system there is an application. Okay, so there are this explains a layer of of um, a system. So so there is a hardware resources, and then at the next layer is the operating system, and the next layer is the application. Right. So this but what about in the virtual architecture? So the virtual architecture is that at the top of the hardware layer, okay, so it creates a virtualization layer. Okay? It creates a virtualization layer or virtual environment. So in this virtual environment, it can create different virtual machine. Okay? So meaning virtual computer, not a hardware computer, a virtual computer in a virtual environment. So in that virtual computer, it has an operating system. One virtual machine or one virtual computer has an operating system. In that particular virtual computer that has operating system can be installed with many applications. The same with other virtual machine in that virtualization layer. It has also an operating system here, and it can also have many applications for that particular operating system. The same with other operating system with that particular virtual machine in that virtualization layer. So, meaning to say, uh, in any one particular physical hardware computer, it can be installed with a virtualization environment. Okay, so for that you can emulate different types of computers. For example, you can install Linux operating system. For example, in that a physical computer that has a Windows operating system, you can simulate or emulate, or you can experiment with different operating system like Linux operating system, and then when you created the virtual machine, you can install Windows operating system again with an older version, or you can install Mac OS X operating system in one particular virtual machine that has an application. So this is what about the virtual architecture. Okay, it emulates or simulates virtual machine with many operating system. Unlike in the traditional architecture, in one particular hardware computer that has only one operating system with many applications. But today's modern computer, in this technology virtualization, you can uh, use or you can utilize and do experiment with different uh, operating system with this created virtual machine. Okay, so that is about the traditional and the virtual architecture. So in the virtual environment is often referred to as a guest machine or virtual machine. Okay. So once in a virtual environment, we can create virtual machine or guest machine. So the virtual machine acts like a single data file that can be transferred from one computer to another and opened in both. It is expected to perform the same way on every computer. Okay, so in the virtual environment, we can create different or we can install different guest machine. We can create guest machine with that has different operating system. Okay, so a virtual environment is actually isolated to the real hardware uh, machine. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, this is a sample of of a virtual environment over Mac OS X. So the Mac OS X computer is installed with that has a virtual environment with different operating system. Maybe this one is a Linux operating system, the other one is Windows, and the other one is an Ubuntu operating system. So it there is a virtual environment over this Mac OS X. Okay. So what are those examples of virtualization or hypervisor? Okay. Examples of hypervisors nowadays uh, used in the industries. One is the Oracle VirtualBox. Actually, Oracle VirtualBox is an open source and free hypervisors, and you can download it free from internet from their website, from Oracle website. And the VirtualBox or hypervisor VirtualBox can be installed on Apple or Linux or the Windows OS or Microsoft OS. Another hypervisor developed by Microsoft Virtual PC 2007. And of course, in the Apple computer, another is the Parallels. Can be installed on Apple computer. Another is Microsoft Hyper-V, developed by Microsoft. Another is the VMware, can be installed on Apple computer, Linux, or even in Windows. Another is Citrix Hypervisor. Another is the Linux vServer on Linux operating system. These are examples of hypervisors. Okay. The virtualization process. So there are actually procedures, okay, in dealing with hypervisors. So actually, when if we install the hypervisors in a computer, that the hypervisor actually detach the physical resources from their physical environment. Okay, so that is one. Another is resources are taken and divided as needed from the physical environment to the various virtual environment. Once the virtual machines are installed in a virtual environment, those virtual machines are isolated, and those resources are actually given by or shared by the physical computer, the physical environment. Okay, so next is system users work with perform computation with the virtual environment. So actually, when a user want to do tasks on a virtual machine that has an operating system, it only concentrates in a particular virtual machine. It does not interfere the computation of the real time or physical environment. Okay. Next is, once the virtual environment is running, a user or program can send an instruction that requires extra resources from physical environment. In response, the hypervisor relays the message to the physical system and stores the changes. Process will happen at on almost native speed. So um, when a virtual environment is created and the user created different virtual machine, these the resources of the virtual machine are actually shared by the physical environment. Okay, so actually, the question is, there if we've created different virtual machines, and of course it has also CPU on that virtual machine, where does the computations coming from? Okay, that is the question. Where does the computation coming from when you are using we are doing tasks on a virtual environment? Actually, the computations coming from the physical environment. Okay, the physical CPU of the physical environment actually shares the speed to the virtual machine. Okay, that's the idea. So the CPU speed uh, will be shared to the virtual machine. Okay, so that is the virtualization process. So next, what are the benefits of virtualization? So single-minded servers, because virtualization provides a cost-effective way to separate email, database, and web servers, creating a more comprehensive and dependable system. Okay. Next is expedited deployment and redeployment. When a physical server crashes, the backup server may not always be ready or up to date. So actually, this is true. When a physical server hung up or contained error or crash eventually or accidentally, it's not easy to put up or to reconfigure a physical server. That is true. Um, so redeployment process can be time consuming and tedious. Okay, so when we are using a physical server, redeployment is time consuming. Okay, however, in the virtualization, the benefit is that it is quick and fairly simple. Virtual backup tools such as Veeam are available to expedite the process 2 minutes. It's very easy to configure when we use a virtual system of virtualization or the hypervisor, because it's just as a software, it's just an application that can be duplicated to another storage media, but once it crashes accidentally, you can easily redeploy or reconfigure it. Okay. So one another is reduce heat and improve energy savings. That is true, because in a physical hardware, it consumes or it produces lots of energy. It absorbs lots of electricity. It produces lots of heat. So you need a cooling system to cool down the physical server, something like that. So, but in a virtual environment, you don't need to do that. So imagine that you have a one particular server having different servers. So a one server having different servers, application or software server. So you um, that's quite not expensive. Okay, So it saves energy. Okay, so that's the benefit. Okay, another is better for the environment. So companies in data centers that utilize copious amount of hardware leave a large carbon footprint. Okay, of course, um, they must take responsibility for the pollution they are generating. Okay, so of course, when you say physical hardware, and when we physical hardware, you produce physical paper, you produce lots of heat, and it absorbs lots of heat, and it produces carbon and so on. So of course it damages the environment. And so virtualization can help reduce this effect by significantly decreasing the necessary amounts of cooling and power, thus helping clean the air and the atmosphere. As a result, companies and data centers that virtualize will improve their reputation while also enhancing the quality of their relationship with customers and the planet. Okay, so it also helps the customer and also helps our environment, our planet. That is the benefit of virtualization. So another is easier migration to the cloud. This is true. Of course, you imagine you transfer a physical server to another location that takes few kilometers, and if you want to migrate it to another location, for example, in one particular branch, and that the server there will be transferred to another particular branch, so you need a vehicle or to travel that. Okay, so but in a virtualization is brings companies closer to experiencing a completely cloud-based environment. So virtual machines may even be deployed from data center and other to build a cloud-based infrastructure. So you don't need to go there physically by deploying it and configure it and so on. You just simply deploy a cloud-based environment using the virtualization. So the ability to embrace cloud-based mindset with virtual makes migrating to the cloud even easier. Lack of vendor dependency. So another is virtual machines are agnostic in hardware configuration. You don't need to rely on other companies or other requirements from other companies. So as a result, virtualizing hardware and software means that company does not need to depend on vendor of these physical resources. So what are the limitations? Actually, virtualization or hypervisors comes with different flavor, but actually there are also open software or free software, but limited of features or capability, or maybe it handles only with this amount of virtual machines and handles operating system, something like that. But if you want a high caliber or full-blown virtual machine, you need to pay it. So there is a licensing fee for every feature, for all the nodes or the virtual machine to be, and so on and so forth. So licensing is one consideration. Uh, Converting to virtualization takes time and may come with learning curve. So uh, this is a technology that once you embrace it, of course, the tendency is that you have to learn the technical part of it. It's not easy uh, to adjust into new technology, no. So you have to learn the technical way. So it takes time, right? So another is sometimes virtualization and or the hypervisors uh, may come with security risk. Okay, there are also uh, some issues with security. So that is one limitation. And last is user loss control and of what they can do, because there are several links and must collaborate to perform the same task. Okay, so these are the limitations of the high virtualization. So that's it for today's lecture video. And of course, for the next meeting, we will discuss again another uh, topic, okay, of virtualization. And so if you have questions, you just put on the comment in our YouTube. So again, until the next video again, lecture video. So thank you and keep safe. Bye bye.